In a world full of hundreds of rad TTRPGs, Dungeons & Dragons reigns supreme. It is the default that all people think of, and for so many, it might be the only system they ever feel the need to try. And honestly, that's a real shame. Don't get me wrong, D&D is great, and 5e is pretty nicely balanced and really approachable, especially with all the tools in place to help make it easier than ever to get into the hobby. Dungeons & Dragons is awesome. To me, D&D is like the pepperoni pizza of role-playing games. If I show up at a party and that's what we're having, I'm gonna be happy because hell yeah, pizza! Pepperoni is the default topping, the standard when we think of pizza, and we get it all the time because we know most people will enjoy it. But here's the thing, it isn't most people's favorite topping. It is a lot of people's favorite topping, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if I'm ordering pizza for myself and a few close friends, there's probably something we're all going to agree that we like more. And let me tell you, if all you've ever ordered is pepperoni, maybe it's time to try some other toppings. Pepperoni will always be there waiting for you, I promise. Now, I obviously can't cover every TTRPG out there, and before I did a video where I covered 10 RPGs in 10 minutes, and I don't like that video anymore. It's gimmicky and doesn't give a real reason to look at any of those systems. So today, I'm going to examine 4 RPGs that I know and compare them to D&D so those of you who only know D&D can decide if they sound right for you. My first recommendation tackles a problem that I see a lot of folks seem to have. This is for those of you who complain that D&D is too simplified. You suggest adding extra homebrew rules to make combat more engaging. You homebrew more heritages and backgrounds and abilities. You want D&D, you just want it to be more. Well, what you might actually want is Pathfinder. 2nd edition. Sorry, 1st edition loyalists, I know how you feel, but this is supposed to be a stepping stone kind of recommendation, and 5e to Pathfinder 1st edition is not a step. Plus, I just know 2nd edition way better. Now, I've brought up Pathfinder in a number of my videos, but if you're new here, let me clarify. Pathfinder is an independent game that is very closely related to D&D. It started out as basically an alternative, much more involved rule set for it. And if you know the rules to D&D, you're halfway to knowing Pathfinder. Same attributes and bonus modifiers from them, mostly the same skills. D20 combat will feel familiar in a lot of ways. Classes are mostly the same with some notable alterations. It's just Pathfinder has a lot more crunch. Crunch is the term TTRPG enthusiasts use to refer to those more solid mechanical rules and maths. First, let's touch on character customization. Now, once upon a time, D&D characters had a lot more options. Every level you gained points to put into skills, of which there were more, so there was a lot more variation with what people were skilled in and the range of talent within those skills. Also, every few levels you got a feat, of which there were hundreds that really helped you make your character feel more unique and gave you cool bonuses and abilities. In 5e, there's like 12 of the things, and you're forced to choose between getting them or ability increases, so half the people playing D&D never even take them. Pathfinder 2nd edition has feats, and you get 1 to 2 of them every single level. Class feats, ancestry feats, so many feats! Urgh. Oh, and those character ancestries? Oh, you want to be a sprite? Cool, which of the 19 heritages would you like to choose from? And hey, remember how I said D&D used to have way more variation in skills? Do you think that either being proficient or not in a skill is a little boring and doesn't offer a good variety of competencies? Pathfinder has 5 levels of proficiency ranging from unskilled to legendary. So it's still not as tedious as buying points and skills in 3.5 edition D&D, but is a little more streamlined like 5e proficiency while offering more satisfying tiers. With 16 classes, 20-some races made infinitely more customizable with all their heritages, and then a bajillion different feat combinations, all rewarded to you every single level, you're much more likely to have a mechanically unique character in Pathfinder than you are in D&D. Pathfinder also has a lot more crunch in combat. No more move, action, bonus action, reaction. In Pathfinder, you get 3 actions and a reaction. You can use your actions to move, attack, cast spells, etc. If you want, move 3 times, or attack 3 times, but your second and third attack will suffer growing penalties per swing. Most spells take 2 actions to cast, because muttering and wiggle fingers take a little more effort than karate chop action. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Everything D&D does, Pathfinder does more. Now, with the way I'm ranting about this, you might think it sounds like I think everyone should be playing Pathfinder instead of D&D, and you would be wrong. Despite the great things I have to say, keep in mind with more rules comes more learning. Like I said, if you know D&D, you're halfway there, but D&D has plenty of rules, so another D&D's worth of rules on top is a lot to take in. Also, for lots of folks, having 100 choices every level instead of 10 is actually kind of overwhelming. Not everyone wants to have to sit down every level and make a series of flowcharts just to figure out what feat they should be taking and when to take them. But I would urge you, if you find yourself constantly homebrewing rules to add more satisfying complexity to Dungeons & Dragons, someone already did a ton of the heavy lifting for you. It certainly isn't for everyone, but it might just be for you. Of course, a lot of you heard me talking about adding even more rules and complexity and math to D&D, and your eyes immediately began to search the progress bar for the next section of this video. Hi there, welcome. You are the folks who want fewer rules. You already ignore movement and spell components and weight limits and all that tedious stuff. And your character? You thought up the perfect description for your ideal character, and you would rather not have to wait 15 sessions of slowly leveling up before your character actually feels somewhat like what you had in mind. You could describe the core of your character with a few sentences, and why do you need all these numbers for skills and abilities? Can't you just tell your DM the couple things your character is good at and everyone just roll with that? Yeah, I'm gonna talk about Fate again. Fate is a rules-light system that is the base foundation for just about any type of genre you want to roleplay. Fate is focused on describing your character through typically around 5 aspects, and an ordering of competency with skills for that setting, along with a few special stunts, powers, whatever that you can dream up. In Fate, the description for your character really defines where they excel and decel? If you describe your character as a swordsman who fights with unhinged rage, you can use that description to benefit your character in combat or to intimidate someone or whatever makes sense. And the GM can use that description against you, like if you're trying to stay calm in a tense situation. The words you use are what matter, and that is so cool. And the skills that act as the building block of your character, they typically range from 0 to +5, or possibly higher in a setting with superpowers. 0 to 5 might not seem like much, but when you consider that you always only roll 4 dice that can either come up -1, 0, or +1, meaning the maximum roll is 4, having a skill that's +4 or +5 is a huge difference, and will go a long way at making your character feel like they have really defined strengths that others don't. When the numbers are that small, a character with +4 in stealth versus someone with +1 in stealth is a pretty major difference. Also, as I said, the system works for any genre. You can use extras to add on equipment, magic, rules for a horror game, whatever you want. When the base rules are this basic, it's really easy to add just about anything onto it. It's all up to you. Yep, it's up to you, and that's where this system can lose some people. You don't have big levels to look forward to, with choices of these rad-looking spells and abilities waiting for you. You get to just come up with stuff and grow your character, and I personally love that, but it does take away some of that planning and reward aspect that D&D does so well. There is no, oh, I can't wait until I hit level 6 so I can finally cast my first fireball. I'm not saying that either way is better, really, I'm not. There's value in both. What matters is, when you play these kind of games, do you want that kind of fluid, ethereal freedom to build yourself however you want? Or do you want the structure and crunch to give you things to look forward to and less to leave up to just whatever? Or better yet, why not a little of both? Maybe you like some good crunch. You like having levels and looking forward to having a few new abilities to choose from. But you also want more freedom to make your character feel unique and customized to you. And heck, that ability to play in any genre sounds great! I'm sorry, what did you say? Because all I heard was you shouting, "Tell me about the Cypher System." The Cypher System is a D20-based system that's easy to learn but with enough depth to keep you engaged. Instead of classes, you have a 3-part character description where you choose an adjective to give yourself a little flavor, a noun that gives you a nice overall function, and then a verb to focus your character, which gives you unique abilities to gain every level. And that focus is what really sells people on Cypher. Everything about your character might focus around the fact that you're a werewolf, and every level is about growing your werewolf powers. And while you're a werewolf, at the same time your party member might be a person who controls fire, and another is someone who dual wields giant anime swords. There's a huge list of these descriptors and instructions on how to make your own completely new ones. As you can guess, this game can be awesome for fantasy and superpowered games, but you also can limit the descriptors to more mundane fare and allow for some truly awesome horror games. I personally run a horror one-shot that's a blast. What's more, the game just has 3 main stats that act as both pools of points to boost your actions, activate abilities, and they are also your health pools, which lends a nice layer of strategy to how you manage them. And don't worry, with the frequency of healing and leveling up letting you use more and more abilities for free, it isn't as intense or hardcore as that might sound. Now, maybe one of its biggest draws is Cypher only uses the D20, and the players are the only ones who roll. The GM just sets a difficulty between 1 and 10, you adjust that number with your skills and other special methods, then you just need to roll 3 times the adjusted difficulty. If a monster is level 7, that is also the difficulty of everything associated with it. If you want to attack it, since you can't roll a 21, you use a combat skill and some points from a pool to drop that to level 5. And now you just need to roll a 15. And if the monster's attacking you, you do the same thing to defend. You can then take these NPCs, give them special abilities where they might be higher or lower level, and special actions that have extra whatsits. But in the end, it's a surprisingly straightforward system, and you can see how just having this 1 to 10 difficulty setup is super easy for a GM to make up challenges on the fly. And that's it, there's nothing wrong with this system, it's the best! Okay, so it might be one of my absolute favorites, but there are things to consider. First, it's genreless like Fate, but with crunch. That means, if you make a homebrew setting, expect to put in some work when it comes to figuring out what descriptors and all that you're going to use. Also, when you have a system that both has some crunch and is genreless, it doesn't feel like it does any genre exceptionally well. Yes, you can make the system work for any setting, and I'm willing to bet that sci-fi in Cypher is going to feel a hell of a lot better than D&D sci-fi homebrew, but it isn't built in a way where the system feels like it's built around sci-fi. At least with Fate, you can easily design extras that make your game feel really sci-fi, but with Cypher having more crunchy rules in that way, it becomes a lot harder to do. And for a system that likes to talk about how it doesn't have a focus on combat, I have to admit, the system itself really does build itself around combat first. But hey, so does D&D. Yeah, people like to talk about the 3 pillars of D&D and making sure they're balanced, but if we're being honest, that is going to rely more on your group and DM because the system itself is balanced way toward combat, with very few mechanics in place to actually facilitate a deeper role-playing experience. And a lot of D&D players love that heavier RP experience. Hell, you could honestly give or take the combat, you just want to focus on intrigue. And hey Klaus, sucks to all that genre-less crap, you want a system that's focused on a setting. In fact, you want it to focus and explore its setting and societies in so much depth that every book is about just one particular aspect of that, let's say, preferably modern world. Surprise! This video's finishing off with a rant about Chronicles of Darkness, the third and most recent system that I made a how-to-play guide for. This modern gothic horror game allows you to play as some type of person in a world filled with mysterious societies and groups where the supernatural is hidden in plain sight around every corner. You can play as vampires, werewolves, mages, changelings, buffies, ghost friendos, Frankensteins, mothers, and jerks. Every single one of them has a main book and plenty of supplements filled with lore, cool ideas for their societies, and tons of rad abilities. And guess what? Most of those abilities have nothing to do with combat because the system itself actually gives a damn about balancing the 3 pillars. Look, they're back! Combat is certainly present, and there are plenty of abilities relating to it, but there's also social maneuvering, a whole sort of verbal combat system, kind of. There's a chase system, there's a system to make an entire combat take literally just one roll. And gaining experience and levels has significantly less to do with fighting bad guys in combat and a lot more to do with the personal struggles your character goes through. Every aspect of the 3 pillars truly matter to the system of Chronicles of Darkness, and therefore you can absolutely, totally make a character who is useless in combat who is still absolutely vital to your party and constantly contributes. Also, Coughed uses just D10s. You make a pool of dice based on your stats and an attribute and a skill, modify it with difficulty and bonuses, and roll that many dice. 8, 9, or 10 is a success, and if you're rolling against something passive, any number of successes means you do it. If you're rolling against someone else who is rolling, the most successes wins. This is a really fun system because every dice that gets added or taken out of your hand for the dice pool carries so much potential, it gives a satisfying weight. Plus, the combining of your attributes and skills to do an action is often just whatever makes the most sense or that you can justify. If you're trying to scare someone with your big muscles, that could be strength plus intimidation, but if you're just staring them down with your super serious gaze, then it would be presence plus intimidation. It gives you so many choices and really encourages creative thinking. So, what's not so great about Chronicles of Darkness? Well, this system is pretty restrictive. Not with characters, those are actually pretty open and super satisfying to grow in any way you want. But if you don't want to play in a modern gothic horror setting, then this system probably isn't going to be of much use to you. Also, you're typically even more limited because you're meant to play a game using one supernatural creature for the whole group. You play a game of vampire or a game of changeling. Now you can mix and match supernaturals, and I have done it in the past, but there's enough special rules for each supernatural that it's a lot for a GM to keep track of, and the different supernaturals aren't really balanced between each other, and mixing their worlds can make it hard to keep the campaign coherent. So, what do you think, folks who have only played D&D? Did one of these systems pique your interest? Did they scratch an itch that maybe you didn't even know you had? Or after seeing this, are you happy to just stick with D&D because it's everything you could want? There really is no wrong answer, but I'm genuinely interested to hear what you all have to say in the comments. Or maybe tell me that I should do this again with some other systems. I don't know. If one of these systems did really interest you, I've made how to play videos for all of them except Pathfinder, so that should help you get started. I'm also planning to run some beginner-friendly games for some of these on startplaying.game, or whatever it's called. Look in the description. Thanks for sticking around until the end. Smooches!